The Portuguese diamond and gemstone cut has become a bit of a hot topic. I think this is because it's become more and more popular, but also it turns out there is a lot of vague and even conflicting information out there about this cut. I've had quite a few questions about this recently, so I decided I would break it down a little bit more. Here's everything you need to know about the Portuguese cut. This is one of those topics that definitely the old adage of not believing everything you read on the internet and even social media is absolutely true. I think part of this, to be honest, is the increased use of AI. And so when you search this topic, you get a lot of websites with a lot of vague and again, conflicting information that's being populated on these sites. And therefore, when you search it, you're getting all these facts that are not only contradictory, but just not even true. Of course, then what happens is that once enough sites or even other social media things that are obviously not even that reputable, once enough of them kind of print the same thing as being fact, they just get reused and repeated over and over and over again until it just becomes completely confusing as to what is truth and what is not. So what is actually true? Here is what we know. The Portuguese cut is a very beautiful and complex gemstone cut that is very often used with diamonds, and it pretty much makes the stone look like a kaleidoscope. The kaleidoscope effect is achieved because there are a lot of facets on this cut, over 160, which is quite remarkable. So in contrast, the standard modern round brilliant cut is only 57. So these over 160 facets, they are both kite-shaped and triangular shaped, which is also what you get in a modern brilliant cut. And they are spread over both the top and the bottom of the stone, which we call the pavilion. And so you're just getting a lot of reflections when light passes through this Portuguese cut. When the Portuguese cut is done really well, it really takes advantage of a diamond's dispersion, which is its ability to break normal white light, which is passing through the stone, into those spectral rainbow colors. And those colors are what we call the diamond's fire. Because of this, this cut is amazing for diamonds. It really allows them to show off their ability to sparkle. On the flip side, I do think this cut is kind of wasted on colored gemstones. I don't think it's really built to really show off the color of the stone, and it could actually make it look a little bit muddy and dark just because it's so complex. One thing that I think it might be great for is very light toned and light hued gemstones, such as maybe a very light citrine or pink morganite, for example. Now, this is where the controversy of the Portuguese cut gets a little complicated. When we look at this cut, we can definitely say that it is a modern gemstone cut. This is something that we call a fantasy cut or a designer cut, and they became especially popular when laser technology was introduced into the gem cutting industry. The Portuguese cut can definitely be cut by hand either partially or completely, and it will take a lot of skill and effort because of all of those facets. Why this is conflictive is because when we try to search any information on the Portuguese cut, there's a lot of conversation around this being an antique gemstone cut. But we really just have to think about this a little bit to realize that it probably isn't true. A lot of the things that I've seen point to the 1800s as being kind of the inventing time of the Portuguese cut. But at that time, we know that they were only really using the old mine cut. That was kind of the most modern cut that had been invented so far. It does have 58 facets, just like a round brilliant. But what really sets it apart is that it had to be cut completely by hand, only using other diamonds, and a lot of the time just wearing down those facets by kind of scrubbing at the diamond with another diamond. This is because gemstone lathes, which they were using to cut stones, weren't invented until the Industrial Revolution at the turn of the century, the early 1900s. So even when we think about that and this Portuguese cut being so intricate and having over 150 facets, it pretty much feels impossible that anyone would be able to achieve such complexity and such amazing tiny little facets on a diamond without even a lathe, having to do it completely by hand. So how did this story come about, and how do we get stuck with all of this conflicting information? I think the main source is that the Portuguese cut ended up getting confused online with the Portuguese diamond, which is a beautiful antique diamond that can now be found in the Smithsonian collection. The Portuguese diamond is over 127 carats. It's very beautiful and very famous for having very strong blue fluorescence. And interestingly enough, this diamond also has a very conflicting story as part of its history. The original legend of the Portuguese diamond is that it was found in Brazil in the 1700s and eventually became part of the Portuguese crown jewels, which is how it got its name. Fittingly, this actually turned out to be a bit of a tall tale, and the actual jeweler that sold the diamond in the 1920s had full documentation that the diamond had actually been found in 1910 in South Africa. When the diamond was originally cut, it was cut into a cushion shape, very much similar to an old mine-cut diamond. But when it was purchased by the jeweler that eventually sold it, they actually recut the stone into an Asher cut, which of course is actually as far from a Portuguese cut than you can get. It is a step cut with very linear facets, and it was very much of the time in the Art Deco period to have that kind of graphic and an architecturally inspired cut stone. All of that aside, the Portuguese cut, again, is a very beautiful gemstone cut, and if you are interested in purchasing a diamond or a gemstone with this cut, there are a few practical things that you should note. Very similar to the Ashoka cut diamond, which is a video that I did recently, you do need quite a sizable stone in order to make this cut look its best. As I mentioned, this is a very intricate diamond cut, and it's going to look a little bit messy, and you are definitely not going to get the best of this cut with a stone that I would say is even maybe under 2 carats. In fact, if you choose a stone that is a little bit too small for the Portuguese cut, it might actually have the opposite effect. Because of all of those tiny facets, it could make the stone look a little bit dark instead of having that bright and sparkly effect that you're after. The Portuguese cut being ideal for large carat sizes, I think, is one of the reasons why it's become more and more popular, because of course with lap diamonds and moissanites, it's more accessible than ever to be able to afford a large carat stone. And of course, a Portuguese cut is extremely unique. It's not something you're going to find when you walk into your average jewelry store. And so if you are looking for a large lab diamond or moissanite, this Portuguese cut could definitely be something that helps set it apart. Overall, the Portuguese cut is very beautiful and unique, and I think it can be very interesting for specific types of jewelry. Even though it's been called an antique cut, this is definitely a modern designer cut, and it is something that looks extremely modern versus classic. So if you're thinking about using it as an engagement ring, I might think twice, only because a few years down the line, you might feel that it is a little bit trendy versus classic or contemporary. Just something to consider when you are weighing all your various options. Thank you so much for watching, and be sure to follow us on Instagram at Winston Gems and Jewelry.